Alright, so in the last lesson I gave you a crash course on using Blade, but we still had one problem. If I open up one of those views, here's index, we can see that we have the entire HTML, including the head tag and the closing body tag. Then if I switch over to the show page, we have the exact same thing again. So clearly, I don't have to tell you that this is not a good idea. What if you want to import a script or an asset? Well, as our code currently stands, we'd have to add that to every single file. A terrible idea. Instead, here's what we will do. I'm going to create a directory for the various layouts for my website. Now, if you are just building a basic app, it's very possible that you will just have one master page. However, the larger your app gets, the more likely that you will have a handful of master pages. Now within here, I will create our first one. Let's call it default.blade.php. Now let's just copy all of this here and paste it into our default. So essentially what we are trying to say here is that every subpage that includes this master page or extends it, that is the keyword that we use, extends, well for every one of them, we want them to include all of this HTML here. But now, as you might imagine, we need some way to say, I want this code placed directly within the body tag. How do we do that? Well, we use the yield section method. So I can say yield, and why don't we call this content? So now within our other views, whenever we create a section called content, Laravel will place that code within there directly right here. So for example, if you wanted to have another section for your header, maybe if you want to include other scripts, then you could yield header here. If you want to do another one for yielding various things for the footer, maybe a script or maybe something that you want to add to the footer of your website, then you could add a yield section right here. In our case though, let's keep it very simple to stay on task. Now an important thing to remember is that you will never directly load the master page. You will only extend it. As such, you would never go to your routes file and say something like view make layouts.default. You wouldn't do that. Instead, continue referencing the child view, so to speak, but now we can get rid of all of this here because it's represented within our master page. Now, remember what I said about sections? Well, we can do it right here. Section content, add all of that here, and then close our section by saying stop. The only problem is we've loaded this view, but we haven't declared what the master page is. So we can do that once again at the top. We are going to extend layouts.default. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. When we load this view, we say we want to extend the layouts.default master page. So here's the file that we extend. Next, though, we say right where you yield a section from the master page, here is the content that we want to add. So essentially, this will be placed right here. Now remember when I said something like yield footer? Well, if we wanted to reference that back within our main view, we could just add another one, section footer, and then you could include your script, do whatever you want there, and then once again, it will be placed right here. That's how that works. So now that we have our index view in place, I'm going to copy all of this, and if we go to our show view, we can clean all of this up too. Let's just remove all of that right here, and then take this and place it within here. Look how much cleaner that is. So now if we test it out, here is our users collection, and if we click on a specific one, now everything is working just the way it did before, and if I view the source, note that it is being placed directly where we yielded. If I come back, view the source, the same is true here. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a basic understanding of how master pages works. The only remaining thing that we will cover in this lesson is the homework that I noted in the previous video. If I clear out the users like I just did behind the camera, what do we do in this situation where we want to provide some feedback to the viewer? Well, really that's pretty easy. Let's go to users index, and before we filter through them, we can just say if users count, we're going to determine how many users were returned in that collection, and if there are more than 0, then we simply filter through them and display them. But what if there aren't? Well, in that case, we will just say else. Unfortunately, there are no users. And that's it. So if I come back to the browser, there we go. We now have some feedback for the viewer.